Hello, welcome to the third edition of the Play by Jelly Note Composition and Arrangement Masterclass. I'm your host, JC the Beard, brass section leader here for Play by Jelly Note, and I'm joined by a lot of members of our community, as well as my co-host, Dana, who is the string section leader. Dana, how are you doing today?
I'm great. I am so excited for this class. This is one of our most anticipated events that we do. And I am also so excited. It's always a huge privilege to be able to hear all of these fantastic compositions and to kind of be able to give our 2 cents on them. So I am so excited and so ready to do this.
Yeah, let's go ahead and get right on into it. So we've got a slate of arrangements and compositions that people have submitted to us to review in this event. So we're going to start with an arrangement of Clocktown from Majora's Mask, the Legend of Zelda game, submitted by Xmist, a user on the Discord server. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to follow along because they submitted an MP3 and a PDF. So that's totally fine. We're going to listen to the MP3, and I will scroll the PDF along as we go that way. So I'm going to put my screen up as a live stream. You should be able to see it. Can you hear?
Yes,
Good.
perfect.
All right, so that is
Nice.
that one. Dana, I'll go ahead and let you lead off because this is a string arrangement. What caught your eye with this one?
Oh, sure. So I think a lot of things, and this is great. I think that it's wonderful. First of all, very fantastic job with the transcription and everything like that. And I was listening to this one just before we started the class, actually. I was going on YouTube to listen to the original because I was like, man, that day three is wild. That day three is very intense. Is that actually? And I listened to it and I was like, yep, that is indeed how it really sounds. So I think that you're very faithful to the original, even with that extreme wild dissonance. So very good job with that. Thought that was wonderful. And I'm looking here, and on the Google form where we accepted all of the submissions for this class, there's a couple bits. There's one that says, tell us a bit about your piece, and there's one asking about specific questions. So I'll start off with what Xmas told us about their piece. And they say, I had to arrange something in a very limited time frame, And if you know anything about The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, you would know that the game itself represents stress from limited time frames and deadlines. I thought this would be the perfect arrangement to relate to that. This is the game's main theme that changes throughout the timeline of the game to instill stress into the player. And I think that we probably all really felt that effect. It's a very good job. And then there are specific questions about the piece. I'm not an advanced violinist. I want to know if some of the parts are possible to play. I'm aware that the tempo may be a little too fast and may be a problem. And they're also looking for general advice overall. So that violin part that you're referring to, I don't remember specifically what measure it is, but I know the one that you mean. And no, you've written it in a very comfortable range. You've written it all pretty much right in the middle of the staff. And barring any, huge jumps or whatever, it's generally, violinists can generally play whatever you write right in the middle of the staff. So I think that you did a fantastic job with that. That's quite playable. I think that your cello part after that is quite ambitious. I know that you're a cellist, so I know that you know what you're talking about. Yes, there we go.
Thank you, right here on page 5.
I thought that was very ambitious, but I will trust you because you are a cellist. You're right that the tempo may be a little bit wild, but I thought that was lovely and very interesting. So that's what I would say from a violin perspective. I think that all of the violin parts are quite easy. That cello part, I think I don't know quite as much about the cello as you do, so I'm trusting you there. Something else that stuck out to me, and pardon me for not having the specific measure numbers memorized, that I don't know exactly where I'm referring to, but that viola part where it gets the melody in day 2, I want to say, I think...
where it goes to treble clef right here on the top of page 4. That thing right here, where it changes to treble clef and then it goes...
I know that from past arrangements that you've done, I know that you really like to give violas the melody a lot of the time. I fully agree. That's something that I a lot of, but that you put higher register where you can play it. You just play it in third position. But I thought it was really interesting because I would normally give the viola a melody somewhere in its deeper range that really resonates and that would really, kind of give us that signature viola tone. But also I must say that, viola does sound fantastic higher up as well. So I can't dispute that. I can't dispute that the viola tone is fantastic. I just thought that was an interesting choice. Not interesting in a negative way, but that's not necessarily something that other people would do. And I thought that was just a very unique thing that you chose to do with that. So very interesting, very cool. I'll hand it over to you, JC. What were your thoughts about all of this?
Okay, so first off, I really like this arrangement. I've always loved the Zelda games and their music. I've thought it's fantastic. And yes, this does evoke the stressful feeling when you get to day 3, and I see that cello part. I'm like, I've seen euphonium music like that, and it made me cry. So good job with that. But yeah, just a couple of quick things I noticed. Again, I did want to echo what Dana said about your part writing, like splitting up between different things, giving the, I guess, lesser known instruments time to shine. I love that because I played a lot of terrible music written for euphonium with people who don't understand that it can do more than just play whole notes, right? So I appreciate they gave viola and then cello, and then there's some cool bass stuff in there too. So good job on that. I like the addition of the percussion here with the like sleigh bell sound. So actually on that topic, the one constructive thing I do have to say is when you're writing in compound meter, which 12/8 is compound meter, 4/4 would be simple meter. You have right here, you have on the first measure, it repeats. So we'll just go with the first measure. You have the first beat is a dotted quarter rest, which is correct. And then you have 2 consecutive quarter notes. So in compound meter, what you've actually done is you've hidden beat 3 here, which is a problem when you're sight reading a piece and you want to be able to clearly see where each beat lands in the notation. So how I would probably do this is I would split up this second quarter note here into 2 eighth notes that are tied together. So what it would end up looking like is you would have a dotted, I can't drag select on a PDF, so I'm sorry. I keep trying to do what I do in Finale. But the this first note is fine, this first rest is fine. This is fine here because that's on beat 2. And then this note right here that I have my cursor over, again, split that into 2 eighth notes and tie that together. That way you have beat 3 visible, which would be halfway through this second note, and then that also gets the quarter rest right after that, and then beat 4 picks right back up with the dotted quarter note there. So that would make it a little bit easier to read and a little bit cleaner from a notation perspective. And then again, right here in the next measure, we have this pattern, the second part of it. This I would probably split this dotted quarter note into an eighth note tied to a quarter note, or since it's not something that actually needs a duration because it's a percussion you're striking, something that's going to resonate for a specific amount of time, no matter how hard you hit it or whatever, you could even just make that an eighth note and just have a rest on beat 1, and then the first, I forget what the triplet syllable is for this. Forgive me. It's been a very long time since I took a band class.
I just say ta. I
Ta,
just say
yeah.
ta for everything.
So what you end up doing there,
correct, but
it's close. It's fine. If you understand what you're getting at, then that's all that really matters, right? So I would probably just make that, and I'm pointing with my hand that you can't see on camera. It's been a long day, but I would take this and split it into 2, or just make this an eighth note and then just have a dotted half rest after that, so that way when the performer is reading this, they know that the second half of the measure is completely silent and all the stuff happens in the first half, and that just makes it a lot easier to read. It's a lot cleaner, and well, it's what you're supposed to do if you're publishing music. I've been told that the publishing houses don't like when there's notation things they don't agree with, but I mean, it comes across perfectly fine. It sounds great. That's just something that I would continue working on as you develop as a composer and arranger.
basically the rule of thumb that we're trying to get at here is that for compound meters like 6/8, 12/8, 9/8, all of those, is you always want to show your groupings of 3/8 notes. This is the same principle that also applies to 4/4 time, and how you shouldn't generally lump the second and third beat together. This is the same principle. This is done for visual clarity, so that just like JC said, when you are sight reading, or even when you're not sight reading, all of it makes much more sense in your head. So you're always going to want, when you're in any kind of compound meter, anything with an 8 on the bottom, you're always going to want to visually preserve any groups of 3/8 notes, essentially. And it's not always eighth notes, and it's not always, la la la, but that is, 3/8 notes or dotted quarters. That is what we were trying to get across, basically. And actually, if you don't mind, that made me think of something else that I meant to say, but I got so distracted by the rest of the string parts. Thank you for reminding me, JC. At the very beginning there, if you guys have frequented these classes before, then you will know that this is a pet peeve of mine, is that silence is very effective. And it's wonderful, it's brilliant, but you have to treat silences very, very carefully. You have to be extraordinarily intentional with them. And this silence that you have here, in that half rest at the end of measure number 2, that one doesn't make a lot of sense to me personally, because this is the introduction of the piece, right? This is the very beginning of the piece. And the very beginning of a piece, you want to give an incredibly strong impression. Could be any kind of impression, don't get me wrong, but you want to make a very clear statement of what your piece is going to sound like, essentially. There's a million different ways that you could take that statement, a million different ways it could be applied. But in this case, I love starting with the sleigh bells. I think that it's great, but that silence at the end of measure 2 is very ambiguous. So I would add in something else there. I'm not sure exactly what. I would leave that up to you. But we don't want a kind of ambiguous long silence like that in the beginning. And that's what kind of stuck out to me. So thank you for reminding me of that when you were talking about the notation, JC. I'll give it back to you. That's all that I have to say. Is there anything else you want to add before we open it up for audience comments?
Yeah, just real quick, everything I said about the compound meter, hiding beat 3 and everything is really the only problems I see in this are in the sleigh bell part. Everything else is perfectly fine. You've done a good job grouping notes here, and obviously it's the melody of the song, so you're kind of constrained to what it is. But everything else notationally is, I see no issues with it. Everything looks good.
That's true. The
It's
rest of
very
it is all
readable.
great.
Right.
Yeah.
So fantastic job. This is a really cool looking arrangement, and I am very excited to see what you end up making next. But I think,
this is beautiful.
now is time where we open up for comments from anyone who's in the audience. If you have any questions about the piece, or if you have anything you just want to say, any observations you have, now is the time. So feel free to unmute and speak your thoughts.
May I ask something?
Yes.
Could you just scroll to the place where there are long notes, very long notes in the bass part, And over that, there are cello arpeggios, probably. Yes, this thing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm trying to go
I
back to the
was really
beginning part,
curious
yeah.
about the harmonization of this part specific.
I know, right?
And also when the other instruments join in, it's I mean it's music, it's art. There's nothing wrong in art. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely I would say unconventional might be the best way to describe it, but like Dana said, like I mean
That's
I've
why
not
I went
personally
back
played
and
the
listened
game.
to it.
But
That's
yeah.
why I went back and I went to listen to it, because I had the exact same reaction as you. I was like, again, exactly as you said, nothing wrong in art, nothing incorrect. But I was like, oh, these are very unusual harmonies that are placed in that. I wonder where that came from. And I listened, and it is incredibly faithful to the original. The original sounds just as jarring and just as kind of different as this does. So, yes, I had the exact same thought process, but believe it or not, that is how it is meant to be.
Well, I believe that I just I don't know the original. It just caught my ear, so I needed to have a closer look at this specific part. Okay,
Yep.
thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I will take a screenshot and study it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that was my thought when I went in yesterday and I listened to all of these to prepare for the class. I'd like, this is kind of strange, but it's probably right. And then sure enough, you go and listen to
And it
thing like,
was.
this is unsettling, but it's supposed to be. It's fine. That's the mood the music is supposed to create. So they've done a good job of emulating that. Anybody else have any thoughts?
Yes. Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
So, during the, let's say, faster variations or sections of this arrangement, would it be best if the violin parts were actually rearranged in a simplified way? Because it would be too hard for us string players to.
I think that it's
select,
doable.
first of all.
I think that it's doable, but I understand what you're saying, and that it would take a little while to learn. And so I think that I also, once again, I think I also had a similar thought process to you in this case, where, yeah, it is totally playable, but just like they actually said this in the submission, or sorry, I already went on to the next one. Just like they said in the submission, there we go. They say, I'm aware that tempo may be a little too fast, may be a problem. So I think that it could be fixed either by taking down the tempos slightly, or just like you said, by kind of rearranging the notes. You could do a kind of quirky thing where you, where some parts have a few of the notes, and then some of the punctuating notes, I suppose, could be played by another part. I might not be doing a fantastic job of describing that, but that's something that I actually just had to do in an arrangement that I was working on. I was like, this line is great, but it would be way better split up. So I think that could be an interesting thing to explore. I think that you're onto something, and it's nice to have another violin player's opinion on it as well, because it's always, the opinion of one person is never going to be inclusive enough for the whole wide world of instrumentalists. So yeah, no, very interesting observation. I think you're onto something. Is there anybody else who wants to share their thoughts, ask any questions, anything like that before we move on?
Yes, I would like to take the floor.
All right.
Go for it.
JC, could you quickly scroll through the day 3 section of it? Just because I want to see something real quick.
Here's the start of day 3 with the
yeah.
So it's just mostly the cello arpeggios, and then you got bass doing their thing, and then violin 2 comes in.
Yeah, so it looks like you don't use the viola at all in that section, which I'm not too familiar with the range of a viola, but I think it might be useful, like they were just talking about, splitting up that cello melody, because that's a really long time to just keep those straight eighth notes going. So you could try to do like a hocket between the cello and the viola that could break it up a little bit, make the part just somewhat easier, because right now it's like off the walls. So that is what I had to say about that.
Yeah, that's definitely
That's
something that could be done.
It's a very good point. I did not notice that. Nice.
And then also for the beginning, like you were talking about that silence right before the melody starts, I was kind of thinking the same thing there's no double bass part for the first 2 sections. It doesn't come in until day 3. So maybe for day 1, you could have like, I don't know, a quirky little pizzicato bass line
Yeah, I
in
like
the
that.
high double bass register. I think that would
Yeah.
sound kind of interesting. It's a very faithful transcription, but double bass part, resting for 2 movements and then coming in with whole notes for the 3rd movement. I don't know, maybe not the most fun thing to play.
I mean, that happens in orchestral writing. That happens in actual music. I'm not
Yeah.
condoning that, but that's there. There is
I
established
am
precedent.
with
but-
you, JC. It's absolutely no fun. But yeah, just like a high little pizzicato part. And maybe if you came in on beat 4, that would get rid of that silence, help prepare us for the melody to come in. And, you know,
Yeah,
that's
I
just my
like that.
thoughts.
No,
that's a really good
smart.
idea.
I like that. Nice. Well, with that, should we go ahead and move it along to the next one? We need to be somewhat time conscious because Lord knows that JC and I could spend so long
Mhm.
on all of these things, so we have
So
to be
long.
somewhat, time conscious. So this next one, I'll go ahead. I have it in front of me.
Okay.
This one is also by Xmist, same person as did the last one. And what they say about this one, the soundtrack for The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild includes lots of new and old sounds. I think that the theme heard while riding your horse at night is the perfect representation of the newer soundtrack styles combined with older themes, which gives a strong feeling of nostalgia. I must agree. I have to break in and say that I think this is lovely. I thought for a long time about arranging this myself, actually, but did not want to figure out that piano part. So extraordinarily grateful that they did it for me. It's a great feeling. I love this. It is so iconic. And it's, if any of you guys have played Breath of the Wild, then you might know when this theme comes in. This is, sorry, nerding out. This is the only time that the original Zelda is heard in the game until you are in the Hyrule Castle. This is the only time. And that's wild for a Zelda game. That is incredibly uncharacteristic. So this is a very impactful way that you hear this. I am super nerdy about this part. I think it's fantastic. I could go on, but I won't. Have any specifics about, could this, or is it better for and general advice about how to better compose for piano? Now, I will give a disclaimer that I do not play piano. I believe you. And are incredibly prepared for that. And if no one here has very much piano experience, I can ask my partner after the call is over because he has a degree in piano. So
Well, that's convenient.
that could be our, I know, extremely, you have no idea. So built-in accompanist. But anyway, oh good, we have a couple people. So we'll listen to it, and then we might not spend quite as much time on this one. And then we could always, I could always call my partner in after the call to give some advice privately to Xmist. But anyway, let's go ahead and listen to it.
Alrighty, here we go. I love that.
Awesome. So before I want to give a couple quick things. Again, I don't have incredible piano knowledge, but again, I think this is a very faithful transcription, for which I massively applaud you. I did not want to figure this out. You have the patience of a saint. I think it's awesome. And something that I'm not sure about, because I haven't taken the plunge to figure this out, is I'm very curious about both the key signature and the accidentals that you use, because there's a few points where I'm not entirely sure. I'm not looking at it. If I looked at it on my screen, I could give measure numbers. Haha. But there's just a few points throughout it. There we go. Like at measure 45, for example, a little G sharp, but then again, I never thought of this one being in 5 flats either, because again, I hadn't done it yet. So I'm just curious about that and whether flats or sharps are appropriate at certain points. But again, you are probably more aware of it than I am, because you are the one who did the arrangement and went in the trenches and actually figured all of this stuff out. And for that, I applaud you. And I think that because we mentioned possibly putting this one on the Play platform, if we were to put it on there, what we would do is we would just consolidate it, so we would have less repetitions of the piano theme over and over, which again, I'm certain is very faithful to the original. And again, I applaud you for that massively. But that's what we would do if we were to put it on Play, would just be to shorten those repetitions. Now, I asked my partner, because I have mentioned this to them before, about arranging this one, and I was like, hey, would this piano part be hard? And they were like, yes, it would be very hard. But then I showed them this one. I was like, what about 2 pianos? And they were like, this is very easy and very idiomatic for piano and everything like that. And I was like, oh, good. That's nice to hear. So that's what I have to share. JC, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so I'm not a good piano player. I took piano for non-majors in college. Well, I took piano 1 before I switched out of the music concentration. There's no possible way I could ever hope to play this on piano. So my commentary on the difficulty is going to be completely useless. I won't offer it. But I really appreciate, one, that it's a faithful transcription and arrangement. I really like when people do that and retain the original feel of a work and don't mess with stuff too much. So I really appreciate that you've done that. And as someone who I know maybe could be sacrilegious among some of you, I have not played Breath of the Wild. I don't own a Switch.
Oh my God.
I've not played it.
I mean, fair enough, but
I've watched people play it, and some of my roommates in college were really into the game, so I've heard this music before. I'm somewhat familiar with it, but I've not been in the position to actually experience the game and
it's
have
so
this as
good.
a soundtrack. But
this music is so magical.
I like the feeling, and again, this is a faithful transcription, so I guess it's not really your decision to do this, but I do like that you've maintained the feeling of being alone at night, riding around this entire huge landscape, and just having that ethereal, atmospheric kind of feel to it. Wow,
so
that's A+ writing right there in my brain. Ethereal, atmospheric, whatever.
See, we're getting even better at this the more that we do it. Oh,
right.
Look at that. Pro show host. Incredible.
Right. So, yeah, I don't have anything really to say regarding notation, because this is so all over the place with the range. I can't just say, oh, well, it's weird that you did that, because you did what's actually in the music. So I can't give you any grief over any of that. I mean, I guess I could say something about the different accidentals, but again, it's faithful to the piece. And I think a lot of the times accidental preference for sharps versus flats is pretty subjective. It's not really, sometimes it has to be a certain way. If you're playing different, like inside of a chord someone else is making or whatever, you want everything to line up and you want it to make sense with the way the analysis of the music is laid out. But for something like this, where it's very rare for more than one player to be playing at the same time as somebody else, I think it's fine. So I wish I could play piano
especially
to
because it's
enjoy
so
this,
unusual.
I don't know how.
It's so all over the place.
Right.
I think it especially applies in that case.
Yeah, it's this is good. I love how it sounds. I love in I think it's page 3, this piano, this roll up, this cluster chord. I want to listen to that again, actually. I love that so much. It's so
It
good.
is beautiful. It's wonderful.
It's wonderful. I think that's probably the most densely orchestrated part of this arrangement, just by virtue of having 7 different notes on the piano at once. I mean,
Oh,
I have 10 fingers. I guess I could play 7 notes. I'm not good enough at piano to know
Especially,
for sure.
I know this one. You roll it. I know that one.
Is that why it's called a piano roll? I guess.
Probably.
I don't know.
But that's what the little squiggly line means. It means that you. I know that. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling proud of myself.
Good, you should.
Should we open it up to any potential pianists who are in the chat who might have anything to say about this? Again, their question is, just
I have a question.
piano.
Okay.
Since I'm a pianist myself, I mean, I do have some experience. I'm just not that good enough yet to play at this type of advanced level. But it's more of a concern, actually. If this piece were to be played by an actual pianist, then I would recommend that it should be done for like 4 hands.
Okay.
Especially for like some of the fast passages, as I mentioned before in the last piece.
Okay. So I'm not super familiar with 4-hand piano. I do know I've had people I know write for 4-hand piano. I've had people I know play 4-hand piano. But would that just be more of a condensed score and just have somebody takes the treble clef staff and somebody else takes the bass clef staff, or how does that work?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Cool. So they would end up just putting piano 1 and piano 2 parts together and then divide and conquer and then play everything, splitting up between 4 hands. That sounds cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But-
well, that's definitely something to consider, and we'll ask them about it more. And again, I can get my get my partner on the line to give more specific advice, because I know that they also asked about how to properly notate for using pedals and stuff like that. And I don't know that, but I know someone who does. So
Use your
I think
connections,
that-
kids.
Haha. So I think that we could maybe go ahead and move along with this one for now, because I think the general sentiment, and someone also said in chat that because this one is split up for 2 different pianists, right? So he said that because it is split up for 2 pianos, that makes it much easier than it would be with just one. I can't even imagine just one. I mean, come on. So I think that this will be a good one. We could revisit off stream and kind of talk about it then. But I think that just for time's sake, it might be a good idea for us to move along. Does that sound good to you?
Yeah, let's go ahead and move on. We have I think it's Cor Cordium, arranged by Ryan, who was just in chat, had to leave, unfortunately. But this is a fantastic vocal arrangement.
That's why we record these.
Yeah, the sound font for this is strings, because it's singing in computer software just doesn't work.
I don't agree.
So we'll it's
Oh,
it's
nice.
fine.
Unless if you use some software like Harmony Assistant or Vocaloid.
Oh, Vocaloid's
Well,
cool.
there you go.
That's way out of my wheelhouse, though, so I'll defer to anybody who actually knows
Here,
anything
I'm
about
first
that.
just going to read
Okay.
off what he said in his submission. So this is what Ryan said. He said, I was in the mood to write for choir one day, so I went to the public domain poetry website and found this beautiful poem, Cor Cordium. Almost instantly, the music started popping into my head, and it just flowed out rather easily, except for maybe 2 to 3 measures. Isn't that just how it goes?
Mhm.
And then the specific questions that Ryan has about this. Do you think that the key change sounds more impactful and climactic, or just cheesy because it's the classic up a whole step modulation? And asking about a specific section, we'll go back and listen to it after, about whether or not it's too muddy. So we'll focus first off in this first listen. I think that we'll focus on the overall piece, of course, and paying extra attention to the key change. Does that sound all right?
Yeah, sounds good to me.
All
So
right.
let's go ahead and get this.
Let's hear it.
Get this rolling. Let's see if I can get this to zoom in. Oh, I can't zoom unless I'm on the app. Okay, thanks, MuseScore. All right, that's fine. I'll
So
zoom in
helpful.
post. All right, here we go.
that part.
It's good. I love that.
It was so good. I love that trick.
I am so upset that he's not in here to listen to us praise this amazing,
It's
amazing
so
composition.
good. What I'm super curious about, I don't know about you, JC, but one of the things that I really wonder is I wonder if he was thinking of this one super vertically, thinking very chordally, right? Or if he was more thinking about about smaller intervals, not full chords, but smaller intervals, and kind of how each part flowed. I would guess that it's more the second, because this isn't based on an incredibly traditional 2-5-1 tonal structure, and I think it's fantastic because of that. I absolutely adore perfect fourths and fifths, which are quite demonized to a certain extent in traditional Western classical music. So I absolutely adore when all of those beautiful, gorgeous open intervals come in. I think that it's lovely and fantastic. I love doing that little trick where you ba, 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 and all of the different parts. I think it's wonderful. I don't think that chord change sounds cheesy at all, because I think that the piece overall is so, unusual, untraditional, that I don't think that something like that could even be interpreted as cheesy, because it's, because the piece kind of is the way that it is. I know that might be a little unclear, but no, I think that the chord change is wonderful. If anything, I understand if this is not something that you would consider. Nobody ever has to take our suggestions on here. All they are the opinions of two people. But what I would do is the very final chord where everybody is just on that D, I would maybe change that up. I would maybe put in some other note, like maybe you've been using so many fifths and fourths and stuff, like maybe someone is holding an A or something like that. But again, I understand if you don't want to do that, and if you really love it that everyone unites on that note at the end, that's also perfectly understandable. But I think that it's such an impactful piece that something like that, to make that final note stand out a little bit more, could be interesting. But that's kind of what I have to say. JC, what are your thoughts?
I'm so glad you asked. I absolutely love this. It is
So good.
amazing vocal writing, and I'm not a vocalist. I'm not a vocal composer. I sang in church choir for 2 years, and I sang baritone, which is not a part that's represented here, and that's okay. But no, I kid. The writing in this is so good, and I just want to take a moment to look at a couple things again, just one more time. Again, Dana, like you said, here in measure, I think it's measure 24, right here, this stacked entrance. Let's listen to that again, just in context. I love it so much. See, in the context of moving between ideas, it's so impactful, especially in choral writing, to do this, especially because they're all on the same syllable, that nay right there. They're all on the same syllable, and it's like moving left to right across your eardrums is just this amazing, just cascading entrance. I love it so much. I try to do when I write
It's
for
so
band.
good.
It's not as impactful for band when you have different instruments, but when you have choral writing and everyone voices just kind of meld together, it's just I love it so much. It's wonderful. The attention to individual identities of the vocal parts is superb. I could sit here for 15 minutes probably just talking about how much
Oh,
I
I
love this
know.
piece. So I'll try to restrain myself.
Rhapsodizing over it.
But it's so good. And there's one other part I have to remember where this is. But there's okay, right here, measure 21 to 22. The bass moves on a tritone interval, and I'm just like, like it
Good.
should be wrong, but it's so good. It's
I
so
know
good.
the way that you handle all of these intervals and the way that you treat them and hear them and conceptualize them is very special and very unique and specific. And that is a fantastic gift to be able to do that. That is truly enviable. JC, if you don't mind, I'm going to interrupt you again. Another specific question that I thought that we could go back and listen for is he says, specifically the section that starts with "and when at last the nightfall nears." That's the one that he wanted us to specifically pay attention to. Wasn't paying attention to the
Okay,
lyrics.
measure
There we go.
39. Yep.
He was wondering all the way to the first "silver stars will guide us." He's wondering if that part sounds too busy and muddy. That was a specific question that he
Okay.
had.
I don't think. I mean, we
don't
should
think
probably
that
listen
any
to it
part
again.
sounded-
But yeah.
I don't think that any part sounded too busy and muddy, but we could specifically look at that.
Yeah, let's just take a listen. I think it's only a couple measures. We'll go 39, and I think it comes back
so.
in. Yeah, 43 is where Silver Stars comes back in.
Cool.
If it wants to. Where'd my audio go? Thank you, Muse.
That's a great question.
Let's reload the page and try again. This is
Everybody
why
cross the fingers.
this is why we have to do this live. Yeah, so I don't think that's busy.
It's great.
Yeah, it's
No,
good.
I think that it's intentionally, moving and kind of cluttered and whatever. It doesn't sound unusual, and I think that it's well done. It's a very well written way to do that, to kind of bring in that auditory kind of clutter, all of that stuff. I think JC, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's not unusual to see writing like this, especially where you've split the sopranos and the tenors into two different voices each. That's going to help declutter a little bit, because you're not going to have, say, 8 people on each part. If it's a soprano section of 8, then you're going to have 4 and 4 or 3 and 5, or however the choral director would decide to split that up. So I like that you've split that up. I think it adds a lot of value to the texture, and it's not busy either, because you have the first soprano would be sustaining this A, and then second soprano would be down here on the D, and then the E, and then the F sharp. So there's plenty of room between here. There's no dissonance. There's no, I mean, okay, right here in the tenor, you have second tenor would be on the C sharp, and then the first tenor would be on this D, but it's only momentary. It's for one beat. It's fine. So I wouldn't be worried about it being too busy. It's a nice change of pace, because especially in the previous 4 bars, measure 34 to 38, you have these long sustains, and it's fortissimo, it's full-bodied singing. And then you come in here to this different, thicker texture, but it's not bad. It's a departure from where you were, and I think it serves as a nice bridge between that moment and then what you have that comes after when the silver stars motif keeps repeating. So I think that's good.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. Should we open it up for audience questions, comments, whatever? Is there anything that anybody would like to say about this? If not, that's also perfectly fine. We're good. We're feeling good. Awesome.
Cool.
That is perfectly cool. Should we go ahead and move on to our next one here?
Yeah. So
I think, I don't know about you, I don't have a ton to say about this next one because I think that it is fantastic. So I think that we might end up having enough time for both of our last two pieces. We'll see how it feels, but I think that we might have time for both. So
okay. All right. So do you want to go ahead
we'll
and
feel it out.
introduce this next piece by Floof?
What I would love to. So this one, this is a bit of a bear with me. So this piece is already nope. We're gonna take that again. All right, so this piece is already up on the Play platform, but he's submitting it here once again because he says he's received very little feedback since publishing this, so any insight is appreciated. And Floof says, I wrote this a while ago now, on the day that Hibike Euphonium Season 3 was announced. I've since also adapted it to Euphonium Quartet, which is now available on Play. If you like this piece, you can go ahead and find it there. Wink, wink. I'm still waiting for the... see, he's still waiting for the first euphonium spot to be filled in.
Oh,
so.
darn. I wonder who could play that.
Shoot. He says, it's something I wrote to somewhat sound as though it was a song from Hibike, and I think I did an okay job with that. JC, you could be the judge. The only thing off about it is how it's not in 3/4, but to date, this is one of the compositions I'm most happy with. And we have a sneak peek here. I haven't said this anywhere else, so you're first to hear the structure of the music. The beginning is a part to express the longing that the community has had for the next part, taking a very recognizable high C in the violins, which is the beginning of a legitimate Hibike track, and it is a common motif heard throughout the series. And as the strings join in, a simple melody is introduced, and we slowly work our way into the second segment. Slow arpeggios bring us into our next part, which symbolizes the excitement and impatience that we have, and the melody shifts around several sections, each trying to get a voice in. Our final section is not yet realized since the series hasn't come out yet, and I'm left guessing what it should sound like. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and hear it.
Alrighty. So hopefully you guys can hear this. This is on the flat.io platform. We'll give this a shot and see if you guys can hear it. I should probably refresh the page first because I've had this open for 2 days. All right, here we go.
Can you full screen it, JC?
Yeah, let's
Upper
do
right
that.
hand corner. Thanks.
This is nice.
Oh, this is so good. We have fantastic composers here. Oh my gosh, it's so good.
So you said that you didn't really have much to say, and that's okay because I have much to say. So
Take it away.
okay, so if you're not familiar with the anime that Floof is describing, it's about a girl who's in a high school band, and it's about her journey discovering herself as a musician and as a person, and the friendships and relationships that she experiences. It's amazing. It's wonderful. I love it. It's probably my favorite anime of all time, and you should watch it if you haven't already. That being said,
JC?
Plug,
Yes.
plug.
There's also a film that is related to this series called Liz and the
yes,
Bluebird.
one of my absolute
Yes,
favorites.
And in case you didn't notice, the Discord Symphony that weren't. Pardon me if I do apologize for mentioning that group in this video.
No, it's
but,
okay.
But the Discord Symphony has performed the competition version of the piece. You got to go check it out.
I've actually seen that before. Believe it or not, before I joined the group. Yeah, that was before I had actually joined the server and started contributing to stuff. It's a lot of fun.
PBK
Go check it out.
fans, you know what to do.
But all right, so I just want to go over a couple things real quick, and again, I don't want to take too much time. But if you've seen the anime, you'll notice that the soundtrack outside, it's an anime about band, right? So you think, okay, the music is going to be wind ensemble or it's going to be marching band soundtrack. It's not. The only time in the soundtrack to Hibike Euphonium that you actually hear band instruments playing is when the members of the band are performing a concert. So the entire soundtrack to the anime is all strings, very light percussion, and piano. So I wanted to, I mentioned that it's a good choice for scoring and just general good practice anyway. But thematically, it really works.
I think the soundtrack to the Liz film is done with electronics.
Yes,
stuff.
there's a lot of electronic stuff in that score. That is
There you
correct.
go.
So let's take a look here at the arrangement in front of us. You'll notice that the instrumentation that he's chosen is full strings. You have violin, viola, cello, and contrabass, and then you have piano, woodwinds, and the only brass instrument is euphonium. Which, of course, if you've seen the anime, you know the main character is a euphonium player. So very, very appropriate choice of orchestration here. I love it. I love the use, like you said in the notes before we began, the high C and the violin. It's one of the most emotionally impactful pieces in the soundtrack. Uses that as the first note. It says, it's good. Just go watch it. It's so good. If you haven't seen it, I'm begging you. But no, it's good. The use of themes you've put in here is really good, and I appreciate that you've split things up between different instruments, and pretty much everybody gets a part that is interesting to play and is actually valuable in contributing to the overall feel of the piece, which is also one of the themes that the anime goes into. But this is not an anime discussion. This is a music discussion. So I have to stay on topic.
You
Just
have to
bear with me.
restrain yourself.
Oh, I love this show so much. But I think what you've done, especially with these different like eighth note, it's not really an arpeggiation per se, because they don't exist inside of any one specific chord, but the way that these different things move around, I think, is really nice. And especially the contrast that you've achieved with textures by putting different families of instruments together is really good. So I am going to record the first euphonium part for that as soon as I have time. I promise. I know it's been up on play for a long time, but yeah, that's my my initial thoughts on this. Very good job. It reflects the mood of that soundtrack extremely well, and I think it's fantastic. But Dana, did you have any thoughts, or did we want to open up for comments or questions?
No, I don't. I don't really have anything critical to say other than why do you use flat.io? Why do you use softwares that do not automatically input whole rests? Why would you do that to yourself? It cheapens the music so much. Please fix it.
It's fine.
Come on, I use MuseScore all the time.
Well, MuseScore's fine.
This is a MuseScore.
This is flat.io. This is a completely different platform.
So sure, why don't we open it up for comments, questions, anything like that, and then we'll go ahead and we'll move on to our last one of the day. So if anyone has anything to say, go for it. It's also perfectly fine if you don't. I think that it's a very complete piece, so I think it's great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think most of the parts will be doable, especially for us string players.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think that there's any issue with difficulty, and I think that it's all very thoughtfully done. I agree. Should we go ahead and move on to our last one here?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and read the thing? Yeah.
Yeah, so this one is also submitted by Floof, same person as the last time, but on a much more respectable platform. And he says, this is a very work in progress piece that I'm writing for my last high school band. So far, I've only gotten a little ways in. It's perfectly fine. Also ignore the piano part. That's what I'm using to sketch out the music and won't be there at the end. Yeah, that's a good practice. I understand. I'm trying to keep it simple to help the band out. And he wants to make sure that everything is playable by beginning and intermediate students. And he says that he's mostly wondering about the playability. He's pretty comfortable with brass ranges, but woodwinds are still a little bit spotty. So that is what we know about this one. Let's go ahead and hear it.
Alrighty. Here we go. I'll full screen this one as well. That
thank you.
probably didn't help too much, but I can't zoom in because MuseScore won't let me unless I pay them. But
this
that's
is the
fine.
way that we are doing it.
All right, here we go. Maybe
we refresh the page.
Yeah, I love when this happens in a live recording. Okay.
That's why we edit them.
Yes, we do.
One more time. Nice.
That is the end
That's
of what he's
where
gotten
it's
so far.
at. So maybe I'll go ahead and start again. That's kind of our rhythm of the day. I think this is, I think that it's great. I think it's fantastic. I obviously don't know. I'm not the expert here about woodwinds and brass and stuff like that. So I will hand that over to JC. But there's a couple parts in the transitions where, like I was saying at the beginning of the episode, where there are very ambiguous silences. Now, I am fully aware that this is a work in progress. And it's entirely possible that you've already been planning to fill those up. But again, you have to treat silence very carefully. So you have to really prepare it, and you have to really, be able to follow it up well. And I don't think that these silences are really prepared. They kind of just happen. So either, really intentionally prepare them in some way so that our ear is ready for it, or you could fill it in with percussion or stuff like that. I'm not sure what your plan was, but those are a couple of options. And I know that in the fast woodwind parts, and all of those staccatos, I know that you have been talking to a lot of players about whether or not that would be playable for beginning intermediate woodwinds. I certainly would not know, don't get me wrong, but I'm pretty sure that if I were doing that a bunch, that I wouldn't be able to maintain that staccato. It is incredibly hard to maintain a staccato like that, especially when it is going so quickly. I do not think that is going to be realistic. So I think that instead you should do another thing that's kind of been a theme of this episode is breaking it up between parts, maybe, in eighth notes or something like that, because I do not think that is at all realistic that beginning or intermediate players could play that for such a sustained amount of time. So I think that should really, really be broken up or somehow altered to kind of, what you can do is when you break it between multiple parts, you can kind of give the illusion that it's, you know, running notes and stuff like that, even if it is kind of spaced out, just like we were talking about earlier. But that is what I would say. Yeah, silences, do something about that part, please. And that's what I have to say. So JC, I'll hand it over to you once more, as the person who knows so much more about this than I do. Go for it.
And that's why I'm here, because I have played all of these instruments except for 2/3 of them. So
Take it away.
I kid. So I'm glad you got that. So the first thing I remember you asking about was playability for beginning and intermediate players, and Dana's covered a lot of this. But one thing that I would mention before we get into the fast 16th note part, right here you have the euphonium part split. And that's really not something that ever happens in beginning and intermediate wind band literature. It's usually only for advanced, like maybe some grade 5 pieces, but definitely grade 6 and beyond. You'd have maybe a split euphonium part, and in beginning band, intermediate band, typically your low brass players are not going to be as developed as your high brass, or especially as your woodwind players, when it comes to confidence, tone quality, articulation, and everything. So keep that in mind. I mean, obviously, you understand this to an extent because you yourself play a lot of these instruments, but that's something to keep in mind. Is I would probably avoid splitting the euphonium part. I know in measure, there's no measure numbers and I can't count. I'm blind. It's measure 5. You have the euphonium split between this low A flat and this middle F. And then the trombones are also playing this F and then the C and then the D above that. So what I would probably do in that scenario is I would keep the euphoniums on that low A flat and just let the second trombones handle the F there, because that's going to be a lot cleaner of an orchestration, since you have the tubas down below on the C and then the D flat. Having the euphonium on the A flat there is going to kind of separate the texture there a little bit better, versus having euphonium players on the F and then also second trombone players on the F, especially if it's a small ensemble where they might only have 2 euphonium players and 2 trombone players. Why split up the sound that they can produce into 2 different notes when it would be the same musically if you just separated it out into individual parts, so that you get a little bit more presence there? That would be my thought on that. Technically speaking, I don't think any of the brass parts are hard. Maybe the rip you have in the French horns right here, measure 23 into 24, and then it happens a couple more times. Beginning horn players very, very rarely can do those at all without having problems. You understand because you have played horn. But that's if were I writing for a beginning or intermediate ensemble, I probably would not put those in there. That's something that woodwinds are a lot better at doing. Saxophones, very, very easy for them to do that, relatively speaking to what a French horn player can do. But technically speaking, none of the brass parts are impossible. They're fine. This 16th note, 8th note double 16ths motif you have here is completely fine. They're not changing notes. It's just an articulation exercise. Nothing that's going to be too difficult for anybody to play. But again, back to these 16th notes in the woodwinds. I guess woodwind players are more used to seeing more black notes on the page than brass players. That's just a fact of life. That's how the writing in the band world works. But like Dana was saying, I would maybe consider splitting this up into what I like to call a check pattern, if you will, where you have one voice will play the downbeat and another voice will play the rest of the beats. So you have, like, for example, your tenor sax. Yep,
Like
that's
that
exactly correct. I would probably,
Smart.
I would probably have the tenor sax only play the downbeats here, because tenor sax is not used to playing so many 16th notes until you get to really advanced literature. Tenor sax, for those of you who aren't super familiar with wind band writing, tenor sax parts are typically not super interesting unless the composer actually, cares about writing for tenor saxophone. It's kind of just like,
mental note of
all
that.
right.
Thank you.
Yes, please, if you're a composer, please don't write boring tenor saxophone parts. Please don't write boring euphonium parts. Wow. I'm tired.
That's okay.
Okay,
we're
it's
getting towards
fine.
the end.
It's
all right.
fine. But yeah, I'd probably try to put the woodwinds in a little bit of a check pattern here. You could even have like a call and response thing where you could have them do a full measure of the dooka 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 doo, and then switch, for example, between clarinet and alto sax, and just have them do a back and forth.
That's also a good idea.
And that adds a little bit more interest what's the word when you're listening to I'm so tired, but
Yeah.
you get what I'm getting at. You have this back and forth where it's not just somebody just chugging along going because you're gonna wear your face out. It's very hard, like Dana said, and correctly I might add, it's very hard for wind players to sustain staccato articulations for any
I'm
length
just
of
thinking
time.
of it this way because you're writing it for beginning and intermediate students. Never touched a wind instrument in my life, so I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, okay, could I? I don't even begin to know how it works. But I'm just looking at that and I'm like, can I do that with my face? The answer is absolutely not. So yeah, I think those are great suggestions. Go on, please.
Okay. Yeah, I just have a couple more things, but yeah, that would be my
Nice.
biggest thing for this middle section of the piece is to break this up a little bit to where it's definitely it's achievable, but you can't go 100% of the time, 100% of the time if you know what I'm getting at. Like it's okay to have short bursts.
Just
You
in
don't
general.
get it. You said you don't get it?
No, I was saying I
Okay.
do get it. Just
Okay.
in general in life, that's good advice.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's fine. That's
Go on.
yeah, that's what I would do is I would at the very minimum have this be a call and response and not have them do for more than one measure at a time because it's going to get really tiring slamming your tongue into the reed, which is not the correct way to articulate on a reed instrument, but that's what beginner players love to do. Unless you're playing slap tongue baritone saxophone, and I just love that sound, but that's not what this is. Okay, and then again, these transitions, it's a work in progress. That's fine. I'm not going to dog you for having 4 consecutive measures of silence because I know you're actively working on the piece. But we've discussed it before. You know you're going to have to add something to transition. I'm not worried about that. Thematically speaking, I think the piece is good. You've got a lot of like different ideas that mesh together, I think, really well. You just have to work on developing connections between different sections and figure out ways to make sure that you're not, I guess, overstepping the capabilities of a typical beginning or early intermediate player, which for the most part, I think the brass parts are perfectly fine. The ranges are fine. The only thing in the brass parts, again, that I thought was maybe questionable is the French horn glissandos, which you can do them. It's just really hard to control when you're a beginning player. Maybe they can do them, maybe they can't. Again, I'm not super worried about that. Woodwind parts, ranges look fine. I can tell you that beginning clarinets do not like to play high. Some of them really can't even at all, but this part doesn't go above the staff that I can really see, except for right here you have these A's, but that's not super hard. And then you have the this part with all the 16th notes doesn't cross the break, which is good. So if you're not familiar, if you're listening, you're not familiar with what the break is, it's the point.
I'm not.
Okay, good. Education time very quickly. The clarinet is an instrument because the way the instrument is constructed, it has different registers, different tessituras or whatever. So you have
Gotcha.
the lower half of the instrument's range below the middle B flat on the staff and below is a different, I don't know what the correct actual clarinet term is for it. So Juan, if you see this, forgive me. I don't have comprehensive clarinet knowledge, but I do know that if you have technical passages or you have scalar movement, don't write it crossing that point on the staff or your players are going to have a really hard time. And that's how you get stuff like clarinet squeaks, right? You're listening to a beginning band concert and the clarinet's going, it's like, okay, that's because somebody tried to cross the break and they failed. It happens. It's a reality of playing beginning clarinet. So thank you for not writing difficult parts that cross the break. That is very helpful for beginning clarinet players, but I still don't think they can play that many 16th notes at staccato articulations. I just don't know that that's possible. So maybe adjust that. But other than that, I don't really have anything to add. I think this is showing a lot of promise once it's actually going to be finished. You've got a lot of good ideas, and I would love to see it again when it's done.
Nice. I think that we should open up for audience questions and suggestions now. I know that someone was saying something in chat just now about how the wind instruments work. Do you want to go ahead and chime in and share that now and talk more about your own experience with wind instruments? I could also read off what you've written here to start it. Let me find it. There we go. So this person says, I mainly play wind instruments, specifically saxes and flutes, and it's very hard to sustain staccato for an extended period and practically impossible for people my age on flute. So that is what they say. That's their comment about it. And I think that that's kind of reinforcing what we've already been thinking about the piece. But I think that's about it. Now, if anybody else has any other questions, suggestions, anything like that, feel free to say them or type them now. It's perfectly okay if you're away from, if you're not able to unmute right now. But yeah, give you a moment. And otherwise, I think that we're pretty much good. So that is everything for our third composition masterclass. Thank you guys so much for showing up. We really, really love doing these. It is, like you were saying at the beginning, it is such a privilege for us to be able to listen to all of these gorgeous things. They're fantastic. And you might be aware, you might not, we are now doing these monthly. We used to do these somewhat irregularly, but they were such a community favorite that we thought that it would be much smarter to do them, at more regular intervals. So we are going to be doing these on the first Friday of every month. And we accept pretty much everything. We accept original compositions, arrangements, in pretty much all stages, in progress, finished, anything in between. We'd love to hear it. This is also the easiest way to get your music on the Play platform. And if you don't know, Play is the web app that this server is based around, and it's basically like musicians karaoke. You can hop on and you get to look at the huge library of music. We're adding to it all the time. You get to select whatever part you want to play. You play it, you make a video, it goes up. Other people join it, and there you go. You have an online band, and it's absolutely fantastic. We, of course, love it. And the link for that is going to be in the YouTube description down there. I'm sure that the link to join the Discord and the link to join Play will be down there. And we'd love to have you. If you have any submissions for future composition masterclasses, you could always send those to JC and I. We always love to look at them. But I think that is all for today. JC, one last time, anything you want to add?
No, I think that just about covers it. Like Dana said, we really love doing these because it's a great way to connect with the community and see some awesome new music. And all of these have been great. And we love seeing all the different voices that people have in their music compositions and arrangements. So we hope you'll come back and join us for the next one, as well as the other events we have. Playground every week on this same exact Discord channel, and we have all the other stuff that happens in the server as well. So hope to see you there, and until next time, have a fantastic evening, and we'll see you later.